So this video is just going over what we covered in class about applying the different colours to our individual texture maps, our individual UV unwraps, so that we can take that into Substance Painter and use what we call an ID map to basically isolate certain sections of the model. So all the skin sections, all the rubber sections, or the leather sections, or the metal sections, and we can texture those individually without having to impact or have to mess around with the other sections. So an ID map allows us to color a certain area or a certain section in a flat color, so that we can isolate that one section and only apply material to that section. It's a lot like a clipping mask in Photoshop. Now, one thing we do have to do is make sure that all our UV unwraps are together that we want. So inside this section is all the UV unwraps for the main body, some of the minor props, the holster, all the armor section has its own UV unwrap, and everything's unwrapped. And I'm overlapping as little as possible. There are some sections where I've got a little bit, I've got some UV islands sitting over the top of each other, and that's only because they're going to be applying, they're going to have the exact same material applied to it. And in this case, it's going to be little lights which are sitting inside the shoulder pads, and they won't have any light affecting them besides their own emissive light. So it's okay for me to overlap these UVs, and in my case, my light UVs are here, and two little shapes up here. So the grenade, and so the grenade will have its own UV unwrap with its own ID map applied to it, as well as the hair. Good. So I've got all my sections together, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to bake out a color map for each individual UV set. But inside each individual UV set there'll be a lot of different colors, and if I, for instance, are using red on my main, there you go, if I'm using red on my main body to denote skin, then if I use red on my armor UV map to denote the main armor surface, they aren't going to interact with each other because they're two different UV unwraps. So you can actually have the same color on different UV unwraps as long as because they're going to be disassociated from each other. So like I said in class, the first thing I'm going to do is decide what materials are going to be going on top of my model, and you can have as many as you want, really. I try and go for very bold colours when doing this, so that I've got a noticeable colour that I can just grab. But you can have, as long as it's separate enough, you can have a burgundy and a red on the same colour sheet, but try and keep them as separate as possible if you can. Obviously, the more you have, the less that's going to be able to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through applying some of the maps to the body, and then I'm going to show you, and then I'm going to speed the video up and show you what it's going to look like at the end, and then I'm going to show you how to do the actual baking of the colours onto a texture map, and then that can be applied to every other asset or every other group, and then I'll take that into Substance Painter and just show you how to then set up your ID map in Substance Painter with your model. So we got our model, and I'm going to first decide what I want certain sections to be colored like. So I'm going to go red for my main skin. Anything to do with skin is going to be red on mine. So I've put everything in layers, so it's a bit easy to control. So I'm going to actually separate everything now, and I don't have to worry about anything else interfering because they're all been hidden. So first I'm going to just grab my head, and I'm going to put a new material. It doesn't matter what material type it is. as long as you can change a color value to it. I'm going to put a Lambert on there, and then I'm going to call that mat1 for material 1. mat_1, and then I'm going to change that to just red. So as I just click on color here, and then I can pick red. Nice and bold. I can see the red has been applied there. And now I can just decide wherever I'm going to have skin, or all the skin sections, I can start applying that colour to that. So around the arm here, I can just right click, go down to assign existing, because I've already made my material, so I just have to go to mat1. Now I've not called this skin or metal or whatever, because when I go to the other assets or the other groups, I can just decide, okay, material 1 is going to be X and material 2 is going to be X. So I'm just going to go find all the other sections of skin. So I'll do the first 2 groups and then I'll speed up the video because it can get a little bit tedious. It's really easy to do this. It just takes a little bit of time having to isolate all these different sections and apply color maps or apply the new material to it. So then the last skin section for me is around the leg. So I just isolate the body on its own completely, so just get this. You can start grabbing the skin around the leg. That should be those 2 little sections there. Yeah, so when you're doing like selections that are going into quite small areas, just try and cycle around to see, just to make sure that you can actually get everything selected. And I can assign a material to that. There we go. So that is all my skin section. So now I'm going to assign a colour to my bolero, or my coat section, which is upper top section. Now this can be a little bit time consuming and fiddly to do because it's wrapped around the fingers down here and it goes over the top, and this side is asymmetrical. So what I can do to make it a bit easier myself is open up my UV editor and actually just select by face mode. So inside my UV area, I'll select face. I can just double click and select the islands that are associated with that section of clothing. Just make sure, as I'm doing this, I'm just making sure I'm getting everything. Decide the collar, the glove, finger, thumb, finger, and I've got the little sections there. Good. So that should be everything to do with that. Yeah. So now I'm going to assign a new material to colour this a separate colour. So I'm going to go assign favourite material, Lambert. I'm going to pick the yellow because that's the next boldest colour in the chain. Cool. So now I'm going to speed up the video and just go around and do that for all these different sections for the body, or at least this group. And then when we come back, I'll bake all that colour information down to a texture map because there's a little bit of a process that we have to do before we actually have our map. So here we go. So now all my maps, all my different materials have actually been applied to my object, so everything is now different colours. I did have a crash of Maya partway through this. I did have to start again. But this is everything all different colours. So you can see there that some of these colours are close to one another, but hopefully they're separate enough. I have doubled up on some, so these buckles here are sharing the same material as this here, so basically, and on these 2 buttons here, so that they can basically use the same material, or I can just paint directly on top of those because they are small. There are things I'm going to have to probably be a bit watchful of when I'm doing things, and this is the more pink sections that are a little bit close together. These straps up here, the pink straps and the straps down here, they're the same, so they're sharing the same material. I'm probably going to use as quite a bland strap-like material for that. And the eyes and the eyebrows. And the eyebrows are actually a very dark blue purple. Cool. So now that everything's had its colour applied to it, I'm just going to grab everything and combine it so it's all one object like that. I'm just going to do a save so I don't lose anything again. And so I've got everything on layers that I've hidden because I just want to have this material and no other material influencing it. So now it's time to actually bake that information down onto my object, or down onto a texture sheet. Now, what we can do is, well, what we do in fact, is change our modeling tool set to rendering, and then light and shading, and then down to transfer maps. So this is where we actually apply everything. So I'm just going to reset the settings just to be safe. And inside here, this is used for many different things. We can use it to transfer high poly information to a low poly, displacement maps to a low poly, color from one map to another, and shaded color from one map to another, and even alpha channel maps from one to another, which is very cool. In this case, we're only going to use the diffused because we only want to take the color values from each of these. So we don't even want the shading on the side, we just want the flat color. So if I was to bake just this model up by itself, what you'll get is a map which doesn't work. So this is what I get when I try and bake all these color maps to itself. So obviously this isn't what we're looking for. It's sometimes I get a color version, sometimes I get a black and white version. So this obviously is not usable. There's no color information. Everything's kind of broken. There's very weird jagged lines everywhere. That's because we need to bake down from one model to another. So even though this has got all the colors applied to it, we need to basically go the long way and duplicate off a model to bake this version down onto this version's texture map. So I'm going to go back to transfer maps. I'm going to again reset everything so it's completely blank, remove that, make sure everything's clear. And I'm going to say that this is my target mesh, so this is what I want to have the colors baked down onto, and this is my source mesh. So with this selected, I'm going to hit add selection. You can see that it's been selected. And now I'm going to move, then I'm going to take this one. It doesn't matter which one you do, but in this case I'm just going to take the one on the left and add that to my source mesh. There we go. And now I'm going to move this one back underneath this, because this needs to be sitting underneath this mesh to work properly. So I'm just going to change that translate back to 0. So there we go. I'm going to say that I want a diffuse map. So I'm going to click that. And now it's going to give me where I want to actually put my map and in what file type. So I'm going to change my file type to JPEG. You can use whatever file type you want as long as it's, you know, manipulatable later on, because we might have to do a little bit of tweaking depending on how it actually turns out. So I'll then actually put my destination. I'll call my, so obviously you'll dump this inside an image folder inside your project stack. I'm just going to put this on my I'll make a file on my desktop, in fact. Call this Zenith ID map examples, and I would put all my ID maps inside there. So then I'm going to call this body ID map. There we go. Cool. So I can bypass this connection editor one, and this Maya common output is what I want. Now, when this gets baked down to its texture map, I want to have that quite big and as clean and crisp as possible. So when I'm actually using my ID selection inside Maya or inside Substance Painter, I'm not getting any bleed through from other textures or anything like that. So I'm just going to up that to 4096. So it's pretty big. Obviously I want my aspect ratio turned on. Transferring world space, that doesn't really mean anything because we're not transferring normal maps. Sample quality is how good a quality an image will be put out. Now, you can absolutely do a high 8x8. I'll give you a really high quality map. But just for this example, I'm just going to do a medium 4x4. So it's a pretty goddamn good map, but it's just not the highest quality. And the filter size, I'm going to probably leave that as it is. I've not really seen much difference with that changed. And with all that put in place, so I've got my target mesh and my source mesh together. I've decided I want a bit of diffuse map. I'm going to click bake. So when I click this, it's going to start thinking about stuff. It's probably going to take a few minutes, maybe 2 minutes, depending on what sort of system you're running on. So this is now looking at the model, and then it's basically taking all the colors off one map or one model, and then baking it down onto the other model's texture map, which is a little bit annoying, but it's a very quick way of doing many colors. Now you can do this in ZBrush and apply a different material to every surface and then bake it out, or you can do this in Photoshop and literally take your UV map into Photoshop and just put a flat color. Now with the Photoshop approach, it'll probably take a little bit longer, or it's not as controllable. For me, there's just something very clean about doing it this way, and very controllable. And all my materials are already set up, so when I go to do my armor, my hair, and my grenade, I don't have to start making new materials or start making new Photoshop files or anything like that. It's just, for me, it's just very quick and clean. And if there's anything that needs changing, it's a quick Photoshop job just to do that. So I'm going to shut up and let this just complete its sample, speed up the video or stop the video, and then I'll come back when we're done. So now we've got all our ID maps made. We've got the hair, the grenade, the body, and the armor. Looking through, there's a little bit of cleanup I've got to do on some of them, especially on like the grenade. You see there's some points where the other coloured materials have kind of like come through and either left residue of their colour, or they've kind of nullified this turn like a bit of a grey. So I've got to go in there and fix a few things. There's a few little bleed overs, like with this yellow section here, this blue section. A few minutes of just cleaning that up, and just so it's nice and flat colours. I'm not going to have any bleed overs or anything like that. Get that sorted. But before I do that, I want to finish up what I'm doing in Maya. And so I've deleted all my materials in my scene. So I've only just got my Lambert 1 back. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and basically bring all these sections together. So this is all one UV map. I'm just going to combine that and then give it one new material. It's called Lambert, and this will be basically the layer when we take it into Substance Painter. Substance Painter, if we were just to take our colourful versions in there, we would have stacks and stacks and stacks and stacks of different materials to work with, and it might get very confusing looking for all these many different materials. But if we just apply a single material on each group, we will have four layers. We're going to have 5 because of the way that Substance Painter will bring in the mesh. We've kind of got to do a little bit of setting up before we take it in, and I'll explain that when I do it. What I'm going to do first is just combine everything, make sure it's got a single layer on it. Now I can name these just for my own good inside Maya, but Substance Painter doesn't control, it doesn't take in what this name is. I'm going to have to rename these in a Substance Painter. So that's my body layer and then my armor layer. Combine all this back together. Reapply a new material. Let's call that armor. It doesn't matter what sort of material I'm applying as well, because all this sort of information like blinn or specularity normals will be done inside Substance Painter. So I just need to apply a material. That's grenade. Reapply that back to the layer. And the hair. Same job here. There we go. And reapply that back to the layer. Good. Cool. Now, everything's ready to go for our mesh, but one thing with this mesh and the design is that we've built her symmetrical, so it's stood in the middle of the world, but with the mesh, this part of the hand here on the left arm is slightly further to the left or to the right, depending on how you look at it. Than the other side, we've got a line coming up to the fingers here, but then there's a slight overhang on this part of the armour. So when we actually take that into into Substance Painter, what will happen is we won't have a even point in the middle of our face. The symmetry line will actually be off to the right a little bit, so it's going to be more on this side of the face here, where the nostril edge and the tear duct is. So we're going to have to fix that, and that's really easy, because all I'm going to do is put two cubes that are equidistant away from the middle of the world from each other. So when we take that into Substance Painter, it's going to see these two edges and not this mesh. These two little anchor points I'm putting in are going to be the edges of our scene. So I'm going to bring that over to the side, make sure it's further out. So I'll just put it line up against there, so that. And I'm going to basically, so I've moved that 20 units in the X position. So I'm going to basically duplicate that and change this translate X to -20. So I've got these. Now when we take this into Substance Painter, it's going to use these two as the symmetry anchors, so that the actual symmetry is in the middle of the model. Okay, so I'm starting to prep everything, and we're ready to go. So I'm going to select my whole group. I don't have to combine everything, I can leave it loose. I'm going to export this essentially as an OBJ. Put this inside a folder. There we go. So now it's time to open Substance Painter. So I'm going to start booting this up. There we go. So this is Substance Painter being opened up, and this is the first thing you're going to see. And these things you've got here, like start painting, online documentation, Substance share, and tutorials, are really good to go through, because that'll get you a good overview of how this whole thing works, and different painting styles, and how you can use some of the tools. Because I find, though this is a very good piece of software, I love this software. It does get a little bit complex at times, and the UI is very compact, and especially if you're coming from Photoshop into Substance Painter for the first time, you're going to think that the layer system works the same, but it doesn't. It works a little bit different. It works quite a bit differently, so you've just got to be aware of all that, and you've just got to practice, even if it's doing very simple stuff. So I'm going to bring in this mesh that I've just exported. We don't have to make a project folder like we did with Maya. All we have to do is go to File, New, and Template is basically the different ways we set up our materials for inside Substance Painter. By default, I'm just going to use this PBR Metallic Roughness HQ, because that's the one I tend to always go to. I'm not going to be using a whole lot of that anyway, or I might even use non-PBR Spec Gloss. In fact, I will, because it makes it a little bit easier. I'll go for non-PBR Spec Gloss. This mesh here is basically my mesh, so I'm going to select, find my desired mesh, which is going to be in Zenith ID. Okay. I'm not bringing in any normal maps, or I'm not using any normal maps, so I don't have to worry about normal map format. This document resolution is basically the size of the document I'm going to be working on. Now I can change this without losing any data, or without losing any kind of information. I can I can lower it, I can make it higher. For the beginning point, where I'm just getting in all the big detail, all the big sort of information, I'm going to leave that as 1024, because that'll help my scene run better. If I start making this a 4K or a 2K, the scene starts to kind of really chug, and it's not going to be nice for it to work in. It's going to, when you want to be nice and free when you're painting, it's going to kind of restrict you a little bit. So underneath there, we've got our import mesh normals and baked maps from all materials. We've done our ID maps, so that's what we're going to bring into here. If you've got if you've done low poly to high poly to low poly bakes in ZBrush, you can add these at this point. So I'm going to go and add my ID maps. These are my ID maps that I've just made. Thanks, Danny. That's Danny Mac, the artist. Cool, so that's ready to go, so I can just click OK. It's going to give it a think, bring in my model in, boom, there we go. So this is the basic setup of Substance Painter. We've got some controls up here. We've got our main 3D window here. This here is our 2D window, which is currently in the initial shader group, which is actually the UVs for these two little cubes. Then we've got our layer stack, and then underneath here is just a load of tools. Alphas, grunge, procedurals, textures, hard surfaces, filters, brushes, particles, tools, lots of different things. Look through those, look through the documentations, just so you can find out and figure out what they do. At the very top of that stack, you're going to get a folder called Project, which is anything that we've brought in externally is going to be brought into here. Or if we make and bake assets inside here, they will appear here. And that's what I'm going to do in a little bit before I start kicking off. So on the far right upper left, far right upper right, all these are our different materials. You can see here all the UVs are changing. So this top Lambert 22 SG is my body, or my main UV set. So I'm actually going to right click on this, edit name, and I can call that my body main, or my main body. Body main. Spell it right, Dave. There we go. And I can actually hide these. So this little dot here allows me to hide sections of the mesh. So I can hide what I don't want to see nicely. So this next one is my armor. So that's going to be called armor. Yep. So if we were just to bring in our color version, every one of these little layers I've got here will be the separate material. So there's going to be a lot of there. So we might have had something like maybe 12 materials. So that'll be 12 layers we have to deal with. And in bigger projects, you might have something like that. But in this project, we want to kind of keep it nice and manageable, keep it to as little as possible. So this is my grenade. So I'm going to change that to grenade. And last but not least is a hair, so I'm going to call that hair main. There we go. So now I can just go through and turn off what I don't want, turn on what I want. Easy, easy. Now below here, directly below it, you've got properties paint. These are all the different things we can do to our model, or the ways we're currently interacting with it. So if we just want to straight paint on something with a red, we can just start painting on our model with red. Obviously that gets a lot more complex, and it will get more complex and a lot more fun. Then we can change the glossiness, the specularity, the normal map, all that sort of good stuff. To the left of that, we've got the viewer settings. So I'm just going to, a lot of this is also editable, so you can actually change the way this UI is laid out. I quite like this layout, I've got used to it, so I tend to keep it as it is. So this viewer settings here, this is all the different parameters on how the scene actually looks. So I can change the background opacity of the PBR. I can change the exposure, so basically how bright that background is, which imparts the amount of colour. So if I turn that exposure down, I'm just getting a single light in the scene. But if I turn that up, then the colours gradually start to have an influence until it gets too much and just whites everything out. Then zero that out. Rotation is basically the rotation of this image. I can rotate it around. I can also do that by holding Shift and right mouse button. And blur just basically makes it either super blurry or super sharp, and that isn't impacting the way the light reflects on the surface. It's just literally the background. So if I want a super sharp background, like that, or if I want to bleed it off, I can have nothing. Okay. Then there's the shadows tab, which slows down the scene. So I never really have that on because it has to calculate lights. But then, you know, you've got all these different settings that I advise playing with. You know, checking them out. There's also this environment map here. So at the minute we've got this blue, green and yellow scene, which is going to impart colour. When you're texturing, it's going to kind of influence the colour. What I generally do is if I click panorama, I've got this whole set of backgrounds I can choose. I always choose these studio ones at the bottom, which are basically just black and white scenes that will give me bounce light, but it won't colour my object at all. There we go. So there's no actual physical colour. It's all black and white. It just gives me a nice background to work with. Cool. Then underneath there is shader properties, how intense something is. I leave those well alone because I tend to break a lot of stuff by messing with things. So at the very bottom again, so this is the view settings down here. Next is display settings. So this affects this window here, your 3D. So that so you've got your field of view, you got your focal distance, which that only works if you've got these two only work if you've got depth of field turned on, so I'm actually going to leave those alone. Then you've got like post-processing filters that you can change, like so you got depth of field, color correction, lens correction, anti-aliasing, very cool stuff. Again, not something you'd actually model with, paint with. It's something that you do post-processing when you're ready to show off your image. And texture set settings. Now this is a very good menu to have because we've made these ID maps for a very, very crucial reason, but they've not been applied yet. So I can actually start going around and baking in other maps to help me out and actually applying maps that I've already got selected or got created. So now I want to apply my ID maps to my different assets. So going up to my little texture set list up here, I can click my body main, and then when I'm in texture set settings, I can go to select ID map, because then that's the little input. I can click that and it's going to take me to my project folder. So I can click that and then I can go to my body ID map, which is this one here. I can tell because I've named it body ID. Click that, and so you can't see it yet, but when I use a certain function in here, it will then be apparent. And then I'm going to go to my armor main, do the same thing, select ID map, armor, grenade main, select ID map, grenade, hair main, select ID map. Ah, cool. So now each one of these assets has got a ID map applied to it that when I come to want to select a certain color, it will allow us to select that color and then use the certain functions. Now what this texture set settings shows us and allows us to do is apply different maps. So if we've got a normal maps pre-made or a world space normal map pre-made, we can do that. This list of channels here is the different things we can do to our model. So we've got a diffuse, which is basically our color, our specularity, our glossness, which is like how reflective a surface is, our height maps, which is the black and white version of a normal map, and our emissive map, which is cool. But the one thing that I really want to make a point of showing you is the additional maps. So a lot of the cool functions we've got inside this program is the smart materials and the materials tab. So if I go to something like smart materials, there's a very cool material called machinery, which gives you this kind of like really gnarly, messed up machinery. Now, if I just apply this to my model, so I've just dragged that to my layer stack on my armor, we don't get all this really nice worn effect, which should happen automatically. That's because it looks for ambient occlusion maps, curvature maps, position maps, thickness maps. It uses all this information to calculate how much damage it should put on, where to put the damage. So like inside crevices it will be really, really damaged. On flatter areas it won't be as damaged. On curved areas it'll be a little bit damaged. So we can actually bring all that information in, not automatically, and quite effectively. So additional maps here. I'm going to click Bake Textures, which will bring us to this menu. So I'm going to change my common size to 2048 because that's a nice bigger nice big resolution to work with. And then I'm going to unclick normals because we don't have any normals to bring in. I'm going to unclick ID map because we've already brought in our ID map. So everything else I'm actually going to bake in. So ambient occlusion and curvature, we've got some pre-made settings here, and I'm probably going to use these. But we can actually change like how dense the ambient occlusion is, or how far it kind of spreads out from the crevices, how little it does. Same for the curvature. The curvature is basically the opposite of a ambient occlusion, where the ambient occlusion is the absence of light in crevices or increases. The curvature is a grey map which becomes lighter across surfaces that are angling away from each other. So if you've got a right angle cube, it will then detect that edge and give it quite a bright edge on the map, or give it quite a, denote quite a bright mark on the map, which is very useful for a lot of these, especially like machinery and dirt and wear and tear sort of style materials. So the others I'm going to leave because some of these other materials need these to work, so I'm going to leave them as they are, and I'm going to click Bake All Texture Sets because it's going to run through and do all these different new maps which are going to appear inside the project setting. I'm currently in the materials menu here, but inside the projects folder up here we'll get a whole set of new maps. So I'm going to click Bake Alter Sets, and I'm going to wait for that to kind of process. So that's the effect that all these maps have just had on the surface. It's made all these new curvature, ambient occlusion, position maps that are all down here. A lot of them you don't have to really realise, you have to kind of visually know what they do. I mean, the ambient occlusion one's very obvious. And then the position one doesn't really make a whole lot of visual sense unless you know what you're looking at. But quickly on, I mean, you can see straight away it's had an effect. And it's had an effect of the entire surface. So if I do that for the main body, and I'm going to say that I want a human skin to be just on the face, or even let's do it something, let's be a bit stupid. Let's say plastic glossy, I just want on top of the skin. And this is where our ID maps really come into play. So I'm going to say, I'm going to drag and drop that plastic on that layer, and boom, everything becomes this plastic gloss. But obviously I want to only have it on the skin. So what I do is I need to create a black mask, or I need to create a mask essentially. And just like with Photoshop, you make masks, or if we think about it like Maya, you have your transparency mask, or transparency maps that we make. If it's black, it means it's completely see-through. If it's white, it means it's completely opaque and we can see it. So we'll do the same thing. What we're going to do is create a black mask, so when we create it, all the blue will disappear. But then we'll actually go in and choose to make the red sections for the skin white, so then it'll only show on the white mask and then show the blue. So on our plastic glossy here, I'm going to right click, then we get this menu, and what we're actually going to be adding is a color selection here, but at the minute it's grayed out because we can't actually add it to this, but we can add it to a mask. So I'm going to say add a black mask, so you can see everything disappears because everything now becomes negated by the black mask. So now if I click on this black mask again, I'm going to get these selections are now able to be selected. So I'm going to click add color selection, and that'll bring me to this. So my ID mask is applied. Hardness tolerance, we're going to leave those alone. And colors, pick colors. So I'm going to click pick color. This happens. So it shows us all the colors of our ID mask. So, and I know I only want this to be applied to the skin. Now remember what I said before, obviously the red is applied to different areas on other maps, but because we're only associating it with this one UV map, it doesn't matter that red is used on other areas. So I'm going to click red, and you can see that blue is only applied to that one place, which is super, super awesome. So I can go in straight away and just start laying in quite broad strokes. So I've got like a there's a sci-fi or a rubber texture. So you got this rubber tire here, which is quite cool. So I want that to be on my main costume. So I'll do the exact same thing. I'll bring it in, drop it in. And it's quite a complex layer, so it's got a lot of drop downs to it, but I'm just gonna click that. So there, because I've laid it on top of this blue, it's overlapping this blue. But if I bring it under, it looks like that, which looks pretty cool. In fact, I think I might have this character have blue skin, because this is actually pretty cool. So I only want it on my main sort of like body form fitting areas. So I'm going to right click on this, add another black mask, and then right click there, add another colour selection, so that I can colour pick the green section. And there you go. So then it only applies it to the green sections of my model, which is brilliant. And if I click on the main sort of drop down menu, I can actually then go in there and change like the where of the object. So I can actually cycle through. So if I only want to see the different channels, so if I only want to change the specularity or something of this item, I can just press C, and this is basically going to be going through all the different channels. So this is my diffuse color. This is my diffuse channel. This is only the color associated with my object. Then I've got the specular channel. Then I've got the gloss channel. So you can see the gloss has got quite a bit of information to it. Then I've got the height channel, so obviously there's nothing on this. I got the normal channel because obviously there's nothing applied to it. Get the emissive, there's nothing applied to that one. And again the normal. So there's some normal on this one, height, normal and base color, because this is a combination of all these different textures to create this slight noise on the armor. And you can see here, I don't know how well it's going to pick up on the video, but you've got a little bit of normal map information on the actual body, which we can then go in there and affect when we find the right channel for it. And then we're back to diffuse. And if we want to go back to our normal materials, so our seeing everything working, we can just go press M for material, and that'll show us everything again. So I've decided I want to add an emissive map to parts of my armor. So I'm going to go back to my armor channel, and I've just applied the machinery to the entire thing at the minute. So I only want to, first of all, I want to only have it done on the, only have it applied to certain parts of the armor. Maybe I only want it on these red sections. So I'm going to go apply a black mask, apply a color selection, pick, and boom. So you see there, it isolates some areas. And now I want to apply an emissive map. And I'm going to apply an emissive map as just a fill layer. So I'm going to apply just a standard layer inside here. So at the very top you've got this diffuse, and then up top here you've got add effect, configure mask, edit layer, add layer, add fill layer, add a smart material, add a folder, delete. So I'm just going to add a fill layer because I want to basically fill the entire layer with a color and then isolate that color. So I'm going to have to fill, and then I'm going to go to my black mask, and then color selection, pick color, and then I'm going to find the blue which I associate with my emissive maps, because these are going to be little lights I'm going to make. So I'm going to find that blue, click the blue, and then there we go. So now what I'm going to do is only associate this fill color to an emissive channel, only to an emissive channel. Now this has something to do with our properties, it has everything to do with our properties here. Now just below fill and all this, so I'm going to collapse that, we've got material, and these are all the different channels we can use inside our material. So we can paint a diffuse map, we can paint some specularity, we can paint some gloss, we can paint some height information, normal information, and emissive. Now what's brilliant about Substance Painter is that you can make basically something a flat colour, and then you can go in there and then turn off the diffuse, turn off the height, and then leave speck and gloss, and just affect how specular some things are. So you're affecting an individual layer, or individual channel. It's brilliant. So I only want to affect an emissive channel. I only want to change emissive qualities. So I'm actually going to go through and turn off. You can see there they're disappearing. So if I click diffuse, it's there. In fact, what I'm going to do is leave diffuse on and then give myself my color, which is going to be this blue, and then I'm going to get rid of everything else. And my emissive, actually no, because the emissive channel has its own color associated with it. So I'm only going to have the emissive channel, and I'm going to click that and then bring my color in. So there's my blue right there. So you can see here on my model that the blue is showing, which is great.